Hello, we're welcome to the Cyrus Dallin Art Museum here at the Jefferson Cutter House in Arlington Center, Massachusetts. Cyrus Dallin was an internationally famous sculptor who lived and worked here in the town of Arlington from about 1900 until he died in 1944. And most of his major works in the United States and Europe were done while he lived here in town, sometimes using townspeople as models. He was born in Springville, Utah in 1861 to pioneer parents in a log cabin. Well, he had a talent for sculpturing even when he was a youngster, so his mother encouraged him tremendously. Eventually, by 1880, a silver mine owner gave him a scholarship to come here to Boston to study sculpturing with Truman Bartlett on Washington Street in Boston's South End. Well, here in Arlington, back in the 1970s, I discovered one of Cyrus Dallin's pieces in front of my store up by the Arlington Town Hall. And I asked everybody who did it, and of course nobody knew. So I said, you know, maybe one of the selectmen would know. So I asked one of the Board of Selectmen, and he said, well, I think it's Cyrus Dallin, but I'll find out for you. A month later, he came back and he says, yep, Cyrus Dallin did it. And I said, well, you know, we should put a monument in front of that flagstaff beside the town hall to let people know who did it. Well, we found out how much it would cost. We were about to present it to the Board of Selectmen when the selectmen had passed away. Eventually, in 1979, the state legislature established art councils in the town of Arlington. I was appointed to the Arlington Cultural Council, and one of the first allotments we got from the Megabucks lottery game was $720. While the Historical Commission was doing research for the flagpole, they found out that there were many sculptures in the buildings of the town, but the town had no listing. So the Arlington Cultural Council hired a consultant. We set up a committee called the Cyrus Dallin Committee to search the town buildings. Well, we knew we had about 5 of his works here in the town of Arlington, and so the consultant went around and found 18 more. Well, the Board of Selectmen gave us permission to raise $35,000 to restore all the sculptures in the town of Arlington, which we did. But I and the Cyrus Dallin Committee decided not to put the sculptures back in the town buildings because they were not being taken care of. We decided to establish a museum, and in the town meeting of 1995 on April the 26th, by one vote less. We almost had a unanimous vote. The Cyrus Dallin Art Museum was established with the Board of Trustees. And we opened up the galleries of 1 and 2 on October the 18th, 1998.
We have an official mission statement, but I'm going to just do my take on it. As Dallin's work shows his appreciation for history and human rights equality. And while we celebrate his body of work for the incredible art that it is, because he really is just a tremendous sculptor, it's our job as stewards to express the same appreciation for people, for history, for art that he did, but in a more modern context. It's a bit of a cultural anchor for the town of Arlington. People come from many surrounding communities to see Dallin's work. And we also take the opportunity to partner with local cities and towns to talk about Dallin and his works and his advocacy. For instance, this year we've collaborated with the Lincoln Council on Aging, the Jenks Center in Winchester, the Newton Free Library, Concord Museum, and Paul Revere House.
And we're going to take you around to see a few of the sculptures so that you can get an idea of what to see when you come to visit. And thank you. We're now here in the Native American Gallery. Cyrus Dallin, being born in Utah, grew up with Native peoples and their children. And he used to play with the children in the Indian reservations, and he also, they taught him how to shoot a bow and arrow, so that he became a national archer and champion archer. He established the gold medal that is awarded each year at the National Archery Association, and he also has an Eastern Archery Association medal. He also was a representative of the United States in the Olympics of 1904, and where he won a bronze medal for archery and in the general archery competition. So here in the Native American Gallery, we have some of Dallin's finest work of Native peoples. He did many of them, and this is only a small, tiny bit of what you would have. But one of the major pieces that you will recognize is this appeal to the Great Spirit. That's the Lakota Native American. That's in front of the Museum of Fine Arts in Boston on Huntington Ave. And there's a little controversy that some individuals want to remove it from in front of the museum, and we're wholeheartedly against it because it has been there since 1912. And it is a wonderful example of the plight of the Native peoples, appealing to the Great Spirit in nature to help them from what is happening with their reservations and what is happening to them with their food and their environment. And so Cyrus did this piece here, and you know that the Museum of Fine Arts didn't want it? They didn't want the sculpture out in front. But Peter Brooks, a very wealthy businessman, said he wanted it. And they said, no sculptures in front of the building. He said, I'm one of your biggest contributors, I want it. And in 1912, it was officially unveiled in front of the Museum of Fine Arts, and it's been there ever since. And it's become an iconic piece of the sculpture for the Museum of Fine Arts. If you mention the Museum of Fine Arts anywhere in this country, the first thing everybody is going to remember is the appeal of the Great Spirit in front of it. So that is a prominent piece here in our collection. When we originally found it, the arms were broken off fingers were missing, one leg was missing, some of the feathers in the back were broken off. And this was inside the Robbins Library. People weren't taking care of it here in the town of Arlington. That's why when that committee that I had set up with the Cyrus Dallin committee to restore the works, once we had restored them, now the people of this town, plus elsewhere, plus donations, plus Massachusetts Cultural Council donations, restored all that work. We needed to put them in a proper museum, and these are 3 of his pieces. The other 2 are the Scout, which is in Kansas City, Missouri, and On the Warpath, which is down in Brook Green Gardens in Brook Green, South Carolina. And another wonderful piece that we have here, and you can see it, is the Washakie, Chief Washakie of the Shoshone tribe. He was called Chief Washakie because he used to take the skin of the buffalo that he had killed for food. He used to seal the skin and put stones in it and used it as a rattle that scared the horses of his opponents when they were in battle. And so he got the name Chief Washakie because that's how they pronounced it in the Eastern Shoshone. So these are just some quick examples of Dallin's work here. And so we'll go into gallery number 2, The Family and Friends. So now we're in the family gallery, and these are mostly all of members of Dallin's family, plus a few friends. But also this room in the Jefferson Cutter House, which is the museum is in this historical house. This would have been the kitchen, because it's the only place where the fireplace is large enough to be able to cook. But as regards Dallin's pieces, we have some really significant pieces here, and one of the major ones I'm going to point out is this Mother and Child. Donatello was the father of new Renaissance sculptures. He created a marble 12-inch bust in off-white marble of the Madonna of the Clouds. And on it, it has the female figure sitting on the left, looking to the right, and the child sitting on her lap, looking from the right to the left with his hand up to the face. Around it were cherubs and clouds. Dallin picked this motif and reversed it for his wife, Victoria, and their oldest son, Bertram. And he called it The Mother and Child, and there's a comment at the bottom of it that says, "Dear little hand, the world hath need of thee, there are wrongs to right and slaves to free." At first we were thinking that maybe Dallin was talking about the black people of this country during the slave period, but no, he was not. He was talking about the Native Americans. Another great piece here is this drawing over here on my right, way up there above the mantelpiece. That drawing was done by John Singer Sargent, the great American watercolorist. He was a very good friend of Cyrus Dallin. They met over in Paris when Cyrus was over there learning how to do sculpturing, and they became very fast friends, and they were friends until John unfortunately passed away on board ship coming back to the United States in 1923. On the 25th anniversary of Cyrus Dallin and his wife Victoria's anniversary in 1916, John Sargent was sitting on the front porch of Dallin's house and did that drawing. And that is one of our big treasures. And the cat, that's the Dallin family cat, that has a story in all its own, and I'm not going to tell you the story because I want you to come to the museum to find out. But it is a great story. Listen, my children, and you shall hear of the ignoble failure of Boston to rear the greatest creation of my long career, the equestrian statue of Paul Revere. A committee of well-known men picked my model from a competition of 10. On July the 4th, 1885, the committee, of which not one now is alive, made a contract with me, all legally signed, to erect in Copley Square my statue designed to honor the hero who spread the alarm in every Middlesex village and farm for the country folk to be up and to arm. Alas, no statue now graces Copley Square. 'Tis enough to make even an angel swear. Being only human, I refuse to despair, and hopes that means will be found somewhere. So after the lapse of many a year, do honor be paid to Paul Revere. Cyrus Dallin did the Paul Revere sculpture behind the Old North Church in Boston's North End on Hanover Street. And it took him 57 years to get it there. It started back in 1802 when the city of Boston decided to have a competition for a Paul Revere sculpture for Copley Square. These sculptures were to make sure their models arrived for discussion by April the 19th, 1883. 10 of this country's greatest sculptors competed, including Cyrus Dallin, who was now a poor, starving artist. And the prize was going to be given to 3 sculptors of $300 each. And of the 3, the committee would pick one to go in Copley Square. Cyrus Dallin was one of the 3 winners with his number 1 up on the left-hand side of the poster. The other 2 were Daniel Chester French and John Kelly of New York. The news media were outraged that the committee gave the prize to this 21-year-old nobody from Utah who never had a professional exhibit. So the committee took the prize back from all 3. The whole 10 artists sued the committee. The judge says, run the competition again, it would only be fair. They did 4 months later. In August of 1883, Cyrus Dallin wins it outright for his number 2 up on the right-hand side. Then the committee tells them they couldn't raise the money for the number 2. Excuse me, but what happened to the money for the number 1? It was only 4 months later. The next time that Dallin was available, and the mayor of Boston in 1884 said, Mr. Dallin, we'll give you $25,000 for the sculpture. Here's the contract. sign and date it, and send it back for my signature. So Dallin signs the contract on July the 25th, 1885, sends it back to the mayor's office, and he waited for the mayor's signature, and he waited, and he waited, and he waited. Finally, the November election came along. The mayor wasn't reelected, so he didn't sign the contract, and number 3 disappeared. Nobody knows what happened to it. Number 4 comes along in 1891. The number 4 was not approved by the committee, but the Paul Revere Insurance Company did, and had it in their lobby since they were established in Worcester, Massachusetts. I am happy to announce that the Paul Revere Insurance Company has closed, and they have donated the sculpture to the Cyrus Dallin Museum, and it is arriving anytime soon. Number 5 comes along. In 1889, Cyrus Dallin decided again to submit a piece, and he created this number 5, and the committee told him, unfortunately, they couldn't raise the money for it. Well, it turned out that Cyrus had given the mold of it to the P.P. Caproni brothers in Boston's South End, and they started making reproductions of that 5, and all the museums in this country, all the collectors in this country that have a Cyrus Dallin Paul Revere have a number 5. Thousands of schools have it. And yet that committee was able to tell Dallin they couldn't raise the money for it. The next one that comes along is number 6, over on the right-hand side. In 1935, Cyrus Dallin's 3 sons said, this has got to come to an end. So they helped him create the number 6 sculpture. Well, the committee that the mayor formed at that time didn't like the number 6 either, but they asked him to go back to the design of the number 5 and the number 3 and to come out with the number 7. Cyrus agreed. Totaling it all up, it was going to cost $125,000 for everything, for the clay, the plaster, the molds, the bronze, and the pedestal. He had to go to the state legislature to get the funding because the city of Boston couldn't expend those type of funds at that time. So he read them a poem of which I was reciting when I first started. They gave him $27,500 and told him he still had to build a pedestal. His 3 sons said, we'll accept it. Well, Cyrus was a teacher at the Mass College of Art, which is now called the Mass College of Art and Design, in the modeling classes for 40 years. The 2 modeling classes donated 2 truckloads of clay and brought it up to Cyrus's studio. He now had the clay model. He then needed plaster. Well, he had been dealing with a company in Arizona for years. They donated the plaster. Now the plaster is made. He brings it to P.P. Caproni and Brothers. They made the molds. The molds were to be given to the Gorham Foundry in Johnston, Rhode Island. The night before they were supposed to go, Caproni's was broken into, a few sculptures were broken, and the molds were stolen. They showed up 2 weeks later at the T.J. McGann Foundry in Johnston, Rhode Island, in East Somerville. Mr. Dallin never had any work done by that outfit because he didn't think it was of good quality. But they had his molds. They got the contract with the city of Boston, and T.J. McGann was a very large contributor with the governor of the Commonwealth of Massachusetts political campaigns. Finally, the sculpture is made. In August of 1940, it was placed on a pedestal in the Prado in Boston's North End. On September the 22nd, 1940, it was officially unveiled by Paul Revere IV, 9 years old, direct descendant. The governor spoke, the mayor spoke, congressmen, senators, historians. They all spoke for 1 to 2 hours. They gave Mr. Dallin 1 minute at the end of the program to say a few words. He was introduced to what you would have called polite applause. He got up to the microphone, bowed, and sat down. In the back of that pedestal in the north end is a bronze plaque, and on it it says, "The funding for this monument came from the Robert H. White Fund." Who the mayor was, John Tobin. Who the committee were, 4 names. But not Cyrus Dallin's name as the sculptor. What should have been the beginning of his career ended up being the end of his career. There were no more sculptures after Paul Revere. And by 1944, he had died.
In non-COVID times, the main part of my job is to coordinate group tours. During COVID, I've got involved in a lot of other areas of the museum, which has been very, very rewarding. And one in particular is I've been learning the story of Dallin's first and last commission for the Paul Revere Monument and telling that 57-year story to a lot of local groups. And it's just been, as a Boston girl, with the Paul Revere Monument being such a Boston icon, it's been a really wonderful experience.
We do have tours. Matter of fact, in the next couple of weeks, we'll have 2 more. We do tours for people who would like to have a group come in, and they can come in any day of the week.
Well, we reopened at the beginning of August following state and town guidelines. We are requiring everybody to wear masks, and we're doing our best with social distancing. The galleries are fairly small, but we're able to manage that effectively. And it's been great to have people back in again, because I think, sharing the stories in person is really one of the greatest things about, a small, intimate collection like ours. So we're back at it, and we're hoping that people will be coming out more in the fall and coming in to see us.